Today we are focusing on the part of the quadratic formula that occurs underneath the radical. So if I write out the quadratic formula, opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, the part that's underneath the radical is called the discriminant. The discriminant tells us a lot about the quadratic equation that we're working with. If we have the square root of a positive number, you can do the square root of a positive number. And because of the plus minus symbol, that creates two solutions. So under here, the discriminant can be used to determine how many and what type of solutions the equation has. The discriminant is the b squared minus 4ac. If the discriminant is positive. So this first one, greater than 0 means positive. So I'm going to write POS for positive. POS means positive, not something else. If the discriminant is positive, then the equation is going to have two real solutions. If that discriminant is positive, you're going to have plus or minus the square root of a positive number. You can do the square root of a positive number, so plus that number and then minus that number, that gives us our two solutions. This happens when the parabola crosses the x-axis in two places. If that discriminant equals 0, we would have plus or minus the square root of 0. The square root of 0 is 0. It makes that part of the equation go away, and you just have that first part divided by the bottom. That gives us one real solution. So if the discriminant is 0, we have one real solution. This happens when the parabola touches the x-axis. So the vertex of the parabola is on the x-axis. And if the discriminant is less than 0 means that the discriminant is negative. Then we have the square root of a negative number. What happens when you have square roots of negatives? We have I, that's an imaginary number, so you have plus or minus an imaginary number. There are going to be two imaginary solutions. This happens when the parabola doesn't touch the x-axis at all. So back in Algebra 1, if you ever learned the quadratic formula in the past, you didn't learn about imaginary numbers. So if the discriminant was negative, they would just say that there are no solutions because there's no real solutions, but there are two imaginary solutions that we now can find. So in these two examples, we need to find the discriminant and decide how many and what type of solution. And I want you, instead of just b squared minus 4ac, put the b in parentheses. This is our formula for the discriminant. I had some students who struggled with yesterday's assignment, and they were getting the wrong number under the radical, and it's because when that b value was negative, they were not putting it in parentheses, and they were getting the wrong number under the radical. They were getting the wrong discriminant. So in number 1, normally I would say we don't want our a value to be negative, but we're not actually doing the whole quadratic formula. We're just finding the discriminant, so it's fine. So b squared, we got 3 squared minus 4 times our a value, negative 2, times our c value, negative 7. So 3 squared minus 4 times negative 2 times negative 7 Our discriminant is negative 47. What does the discriminant of negative 47 mean? Blue, green, or pink? Is it going to be 2 real, 1 real, or 2 imaginary? 2 imaginary solutions. Now, I haven't looked at the chapter 3 test yet, but you know the test questions where there's like tiles and you have to drag one tile and connect it to the thing it matches with, like the drag and drop matching? This could be where there's like 3 equations on one side and then it says 2 real solutions, 1 real solution, 2 imaginary solutions, and you have to drag the equation over to match. It could also be a table where there's 3 quadratic equations, find the discriminant, and then you have to check the box to say if it's 2 real, 1 real, or 2 imaginary. All right, why don't you find number 2 on your own? Find the discriminant and decide if there's 2 real, 1 real, or 2 imaginary solutions. This time your b value is negative, so it's important to make sure you put that b value inside parentheses. So negative 4 squared minus 4 times 4 times 1. You should have gotten 0. Did you get 0? Okay. What does the discriminant of 0 mean? 1 real solution. So I think 4 or 5 of your problems on your assignment today are find the discriminant and decide the number and type of solutions. So light work, right? The last problem on your assignment is a word problem similar to number 4. And this is using the quadratic formula, the object dropped or thrown formula, which is right here. We're actually going to skip number 3, so I'm going to rewrite this formula down here in the number 3 space, and then we can talk about what all the pieces mean. So h equals negative 16t squared plus v sub 0 t plus h sub 0. T is kind of like x. So instead of talking about x equals, we're going to be talking about t equals. So we'll use the quadratic formula using t. T is time. This first h is the ending height. So if an object is like launched or thrown, when the object hits the ground, that would be the ending height. Or if the object is caught, that would be an ending height. Negative 16 has to do with gravity, so we don't really do anything with this first term. The next thing is v sub 0. V sub 0 is the initial vertical velocity. It's basically how hard is this thing being thrown? How fast is it being launched? If we were dropping an object, that number would be 0 because we're not pushing an object down when we're dropping it. We're just letting it go. So we're not putting any velocity on it. But if we throw something, is it me throwing it, which means it's basically being lobbed, or is it like Alex Gordon throwing it, in which case it's like, you know, there's a lot of force behind that throw. And h sub 0 is the initial height, or the starting height. Initial is the same as starting, so the starting height. If something is launched out of a cannon that is 10 feet in the air, the starting height is 10 feet. If something is thrown and it's released at 6 feet above the ground, then the initial height is 6. So let's look through this problem. A basketball player passes the ball to a teammate who catches it 11 feet above the court, just above the rim of the basket, and slam dunks it through the hoop. Apparently this play is called an alley-oop. I know nothing about basketball. I just copied this problem out of a book. The first player releases the ball 5 feet above the court with an initial vertical velocity of 21 feet per second. How long is the ball in the air before being caught, assuming it is caught as it rises? We're going to ignore the last sentence for right now and just focus on these three numbers. So catching a ball, that's the end height. Releasing the ball, that's the starting height. And the initial vertical velocity is 21 feet per second. So I'm going to put all of these numbers into this formula. 11 is going to go in place of the regular h. 21 goes in place of the v. And 5 goes in place of the initial height. Before we use the quadratic formula on this, what do we have to have on one side of the formula? We have to have a 0. So the first thing we need to do is subtract 11 on both sides. So we have 0 equals . Okay, now I'm sure someone's going to mention it. What have I always said about our a value? It's easiest if the a value is positive. Now, I'm going to kind of change my tune on that a little bit. If our goal is to simplify the radical and simplify the answer, then yes, your a value being positive is very important. We're not going to simplify this. We're going to plug this into a calculator and get the actual number of seconds. So then the calculator can deal with the negative. It's fine. We'll use the negative. It's okay. Word problems are the only time that an a value being negative is okay. So let's plug this into the quadratic formula. This time it's t equals, not x equals, opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Our first answer we're going to get from using the plus sign. So negative 21 plus the square root of 57, hit enter, divide by negative 32, enter. Our first answer is 0.42. So using the plus sign, we got 0.42 seconds. Now I'll do the problem again using the minus sign. Negative 21 minus the square root of 57, enter, divided by negative 32, enter. Using the minus sign, I got 0.89 seconds. Sometimes when you do this, you'll get one positive answer and one negative answer. If you get a negative answer, can we have negative seconds? We're not time travelers, so no, we can't have negative seconds. In this case, we got two positive answers. So which one is correct? It says, how long is the ball in the air before being caught, assuming it is caught as it rises? This ball follows a path like this, a parabolic path. The ball is 11 feet high when it's caught in two places. The first one is as the ball rises. The second one is as the ball is falling back toward the ground. This first one is going to be at 0.42 seconds. This second one is going to be after 0.89 seconds. So if you want the ball when it rises, that means you want the shorter time. If you're waiting for it to fall again, then you're looking at the longer time of our two answers. So because we want to catch the ball when it's rising, you want the shortest number of seconds of your two answers. So this one is 0.42 seconds. Okay, there's one problem like this on your assignment, and I want you to try it out. There is one of these on your test, but there's a problem identical to it on the review. So when you actually do the review, you can really make sure you understand that type of problem. Put something about it down in your notes so that you can replicate that when you take the test.